All right, we should be streaming.
Hi, Michael. Getting started.
We are now streaming the May 18th Sustainability Advisory Committee. So Anna, do you want to get started?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chair Anna Priest, and I would like to welcome you to the Sustainability Advisory Committee on Energy and the Environment. As Bridget just mentioned, this is our May 2022 meeting. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through these meetings virtually in case there are any technical difficulties. We are streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the link on the front page of the city's website and also on SACE's committee page. And we also have the option for the public to listen live by telephone. So for those of you out there with us today, welcome. I'll now go through and introduce all the committee members who are participating virtually. If you could just unmute yourself and say hello. That will be our roll call for today's committee meeting. All right, do we have Ann Keller?
Hi, everyone.
Kim Austin.
Happy afternoon.
Hey. Tim Orman.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Chris Pellrine.
Present.
Steve Barron.
Hello.
Allison Ormsby.
Greetings.
Michael Totten.
Hello, everyone.
And did Maggie Gulick join yet? Is she here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm here.
Awesome. Hey, Maggie. All right. And then we also have staff members from the Sustainability Office, Bridget Herring and Kira Bullen. Thanks for joining us. All right, to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a roll call for each vote if we have any. I don't even think we have any votes today. But additionally, as we move through presentations today, if you have any questions, please hold those for the end of each presentation, and you can use the raise hand button when you have a question, and I will call upon you when it's your turn, just so we don't clog up the lines. All right, so first item on today's agenda is approval of March minutes. Are there any edits to the March minutes document? Okay, can I have a motion to approve March minutes?
I will.
Was that Tim? Okay, Tim motioned. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Ann seconded. And now we do have a vote, actually. So here we go. We always have something to vote on. So to approve, just say yay or nay. I'm going to go down the list. Ann?
Yay.
Kim?
Yay.
Maggie?
Yay.
Tim?
Yay.
Michael?
Yay.
Chris?
Yay.
Steve?
Yay.
Allison?
Yay.
And myself is also a yay. Thank you. All right, I have not gotten any notice about public comments yet, but if we get some, I will read those at the end of the meeting. So that was second on the agenda. Third on the agenda is updates. And the first update is the working group updates. So our first working group on the agenda is the Climate Resilience Group. We have Ann on for giving this update, but I'm going to actually do the update today. And essentially, we actually met yesterday, and we met with AECom, who is the subcontractor helping us develop the Municipal Climate Action Plan. And we essentially met with them and discussed prioritization factors in order to help the city figure out how to rank actionable items to help us move forward with our climate action and all the resolutions that are hanging out there. And we had some pretty hard feedback for AECom. And so I think we're going to meet again pretty soon. And hopefully we can get the ship moved into a new direction so that we are all on the same page as far as what the MCAP looks like. All right. Michael, you got a question?
Michael, you're on mute.
Can other members that aren't on the subcommittee join in that meeting, or how does that work?
So I think you have to have less than 4 SACE members in attendance in order for it not to be considered a quorum. And if it is a quorum, so more than 4 members, then we have to call it as an official SACE meeting where we have to do a public notifications and public comment and all the rigmarole. So unfortunately, we already have 4 SACE members, myself, Ann, Tim, and Kim, who are participating in that. But if someone can't attend, we certainly can let you know.
And I excuse my ignorance, but is there input then from the Energy Committee, Subcommittee, to the Climate Subcommittee? Or are they each separately meeting with AECom, or is it all through the Climate Subcommittee? I apologize for not knowing.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you for good questions. Currently, we just had them meeting with the climate group only, and then we were going to kind of come to you all once more work had been solidified. We're certainly not at that point yet to really report out any new information. I think the ultimate goal is once AECom moves forward with more tangible goals and priorities for the MCAP, I think they are going to actually come and report out to us at the next SACE meeting in July, I think is what we discussed. Is that right?
The timeline's a little uncertain right now since they
okay.
pushed back the final deliverable, but I think there will be probably an opportunity for you to give some feedback, Michael, just in a different.
Right. And I guess the question is, how early can we provide input or feedback, since having seen so many econ reports over the decades, too many of them do cut and paste, and you don't get exactly what is required for your locality, which it sounds like you addressed in this last conversation with them. But given there's so much that's happened just in the last 24 months, on both what other cities and counties have done that just 24 months ago were said to be uneconomic or off the charts in most of the consulting groups to recommend. I'm wondering what's the earliest opportunity to look at what their new priority list will be, or what your recommendations for their priorities. Does that make sense?
So that work is underway now. I think if there's something you want me to make sure that to pass along, you can feel free to email that to me. But that list hasn't been generated yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, we're still in the preliminary. What makes something a priority? What are the key indicators that make something a priority? So still in the very green stages of this.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
but we can certainly share any materials that we come up with throughout the process and get your feedback that way as well.
Terrific.
And anybody else on the board who's interested in that, please let me know, and we can certainly share that with anyone willing and available. Are there any other questions about the MCAP and the process? or any other maybe working group committee members that want to give an update from their perspective?
Oh, I'd just like to be informed. This is Alice.
Great. Thanks, Allison. All right. Well, then next on the agenda under the working group updates is the waste reduction working group. Allison, you want to give an update?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So since our last meeting in March, April was Food Waste Reduction Month. So there were actions happening in lots of places to reduce food waste. I'll just give a little shout out to the city drop-off composting sites, which are going very well. And there was lots of kind of media and action about food waste reduction. And also our subcommittee did meet with Anna and Hartwell from Mountain True about the plastic reduction efforts. So we'll be hearing more about that later, but just so that everybody knows, we did meet with that group and provided some feedback. So I think those were our major actions that are coming to mind. But if anybody else from the group wants to add anything, please feel free. Or Kira. I think Kira just went to a cool conference too, but Maggie, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, sorry. I'm having a childcare crisis today, so presenting is a little bit challenging. However, yeah, I'd like to just mention that the food waste solutions, both Kira and I were working with Food Waste Solutions to run the Food Waste Reduction Month campaign on Instagram, which engaged, I don't know, over 3,000 different accounts and had a lot of good engagement throughout the month. Basically highlighting the compost drop-off sites, different workshops that are available, best practices for composting at home and tips for reducing food waste. And we just had a lot of good interaction with community members. And then we helped plan an end of month event called Taste It, Don't Waste It, which was held at Wicked Weed West and featured 4 local chefs who created dishes using food that otherwise would have been thrown away or composted. And that was a really big success. And I think it was really great overall. And I think we're going to build on it, year after year, hopefully, and have it really grow. And so overall, I'd say it was a success. I wish Kira could chime in because she did a lot of great work for it as well. So yeah, and if anybody wants any more information about it, just feel free to shoot me an email or something.
I'm happy to chime in as much as to say Maggie has done excellent work on this campaign, and I agree it's been a great success. And Allison, to your point, we did go to the Refed Food Waste Solutions Summit in Minneapolis with colleagues from Bountiful Cities and UNC Asheville and the Asheville Bunker Food Policy Council, all of which are community partners doing some really awesome work in the food waste reduction space. And we've collected over 30 tons of food scraps at our Stevens Lee drop-off to date. So those things are going really well. And thanks to Maggie and Allison and Kim for their work in this space.
And I'll just mention that if you want more information, the website is wncfoodwaste.org, which is what Maggie mentioned, the food waste solutions efforts in our region.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. Good work. Are there any questions for the Waste Reduction Working Group? All right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is an update from the Energy Working Group. Chris, you want to give us an update?
Sure. Thanks, Anna. Not a whole lot of updates or action since the last meeting we had. There's been some activity related to, I think we discussed it on the last call, around Duke Energy's net metering proposed net metering rules, which are, fairly contentious. And there's a lot of folks that are, advocating for it to not be approved and go through. And I think there's a lot of people who are planning on taking legal action if it does end up going through. So I think that's a good thing because it does hurt the local solar market here in Asheville and across the state. So it'll be nice to see if those revisions are not made. I missed the last Blue Horizons project as I was out on spring break. Stephen or Michael, I'm not sure if there's anything that you would like to discuss or bring up.
I'm afraid I missed it too. I'm sorry, I can't fill in.
Okay. Yeah,
Oops, I did as well.
and that's it from the working group.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions? Well, good work on keeping us updated with the solar Duke, whatever you want to call it, fiasco. Hopefully not. I know that's something that we all probably are keeping our ears to the ground to. All right. 3B on the agenda is staff update. Bridget is going to give us an update on city council boards and commissions restructuring and boards and commissions public input.
Sure. So, hey everyone, Bridget Herring, Sustainability Director. Just wanted to follow up first to talk about the return to in-person meetings that's still in a state of flux as we're going through this never-ending pandemic, it appears. So stay tuned. I'll keep you posted as soon as we know more, but probably looking towards the fall. I also wanted to link in the agenda for our SACE members as well as our members of the public that staff gave an update to City Council on the board restructure process and what's happened so far before their last council meeting at a work session. So you can view that recording if you want to see what was presented and the feedback that council had on this process. But basically, it looks like there's going to be more input and more thought going into, what kind of working group structure, how people will do work, how things will flow. And it's still in a state of flux. And so the public input page is also there for anyone, members of the public, committee members, to be able to stay engaged on what information's been presented, what actions have happened, and an opportunity to also give your input. So I think it's great if anybody on SACE is able to, spend some time. I know Ann and Anna have for sure, but it's a good perspective to share since you are actively engaged on a board and committee to be able to talk about the good and the bad of your experience so far so that we can hopefully get to a better place. Does anyone have any questions?
Have they come up with a timeline for when this restructuring might happen?
So I think what we heard from council and from everyone else who's been engaged on this topic was maybe to slow down and take more feedback. So I think the timeline is not set at this moment in time.
Any other questions for Bridget, who I should also mention congratulations are in order because she's now our Sustainability Director. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, so next on the agenda is item number 4, old business. We had nothing under old business, so we'll move on to item number 5, which is new business, and it brings us to our plastic reduction policy presentation. I know we have Anna Alsobrook and Hartwell Carson attending from Mountain True, but I believe Anna will introduce a couple of other presenters for this presentation. Anna, you have the microphone.
Thanks, Anna. It is weird being around other Annas. I'm not used to that. So real quick, I'll just introduce, Hartwell, who's in the box of faces somewhere. Ken, do you want to pop in real quick and say hi? I'm not hearing you. Are y'all hearing him? Okay, maybe we'll come back to you, Ken. Susanna, are you in there?
I am. Hi. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I'm Susanna Knox, and I'm a senior attorney at the Southern Environmental Law Center. So thanks for having us today.
Yeah, let me try again, see if you can hear me now.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, took the headset off and it seems to work. I have no idea why, but anyway, I'm Kim Brame. I'm representing the Sierra Club of the task force that's worked on putting this ordinance together and focusing on all the things it will take to make it successful.
And then Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Laping, and I'm a volunteer with Plastic Free WNC, and I'm happy to be here.
And Hartwell.
Yeah, I'm Hartwell Carson, French Broad River Keeper with Mountain True.
And then I'm Anna Alsterbrook. I do watershed outreach in the French Broad River Keeper program at Mountain True. And then I'm going to kind of start us off today and give a brief overview of the complexity of the plastics problem. And then we'll kind of popcorn around and folks will chime in with what we want to do about it. So next slide, is it Kira doing the slides? Yeah, okay. So most folks don't know this, but plastics are made from a byproduct of hydrofracking called ethane. And what we're starting to see is that as people and places are moving to more sustainable and energy efficient ways for transportation and energy, the plastics industry is heavily investing and relying on, the oil and gas industry is heavily relying on plastics as kind of their lifeline or their plan B. Next slide. So this graph shows oil demand growth from 2020 to 2040, and plastics is that column on the far left, and you can see it vastly outweighs all the other demands for oil across sectors. And so really plastics is a climate change issue. We can't really address climate change if we leave plastics off the table. Next slide. It's also an environmental justice issue, and it is so for a couple different reasons. The first is based on where plastics are manufactured. So if you think about Cancer Alley or St. James Parish down in Louisiana, where over 150 petrochemical industries are located, Manchester, Texas, all these communities are low income and communities of color. So these are the communities that are bearing the brunt of the pollution that these manufacturing facilities emit. The second way it's an environmental justice issue is based on where plastics end up. A lot of folks don't realize that we actually ship a lot of our quote unquote recyclable plastic overseas. It used to be China, but they closed their doors to us in 2018. And so it's been shuffled around to other places in Southeast Asia, a little bit of Africa and places like that. Next slide. So plastics recycling isn't really working. We made this video with Nancy Lawson, one of the owners of Curbside Services. So hopefully that'll play. Can you click that?
So this is all of the waste, and you can see that the majority of it is bags, right? Hi, I'm Nancy Lawson. My husband Barry and I are the owners and operators of Curbside Management, and here we are at our material recovery facility. The majority of what we get that we cannot accept is plastic bags. people should not put plastic shopping bags in their recyclables. We have about 18 to 20 workers that are sorting and separating our recyclables and picking out and making individual products. 60 or 70% of what our workers do here is actually removing plastic bags out of our system. Our landfill costs for just getting rid of the plastic bags alone is somewhere around $10,000 or more a month. An ordinance or a plastic bag, shopping bag ban would go a long way in helping us recycle more efficiently.
So yeah, it's a big economic burden for, oh, did I lose it? I'll keep going. It's a big economic burden for curbside services. It's also, taking up a fair amount of space in our landfill. I read one report where plastic incorporated about 12% of what's in our landfill. So on top of that, a study came out 2 weeks ago or so stating that our recycling rate for plastics has dropped to about 5 or 6%. It peaked around 9%, but in the last few years, it's dropped since then. But our plastic waste generation has gone up exponentially, especially since COVID. On top of that, when an item does get recycled, it typically gets downcycled. And what that means is, a plastic bottle turns into a lesser quality product, like maybe a piece of carpet or some type of synthetic clothing material. And what that means is that that item can only be recycled 1 or 2 times before it reaches a form that can't be recycled anymore. Next slide.
So this is all.
What you don't know is that she had a rat kind of crawling around her foot while we were filming that. She's such a trooper. A study came out in 2019 that estimates that about 1/3 of plastic waste enters the environment despite our best efforts. And it doesn't, most of that is single-use plastic, and it doesn't biodegrade. It can persist in the environment for a very long time. So it becomes basically a stormwater issue. Scientists are predicting that by 2025, there will be 1 pound of plastic for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean. So that's only 3 years from now. By 2050, that number reverses. So 3 pounds of plastic for every 1 pound of fish. Next slide. Microplastics don't ever biodegrade. They just break down into smaller and smaller pieces called nanoplastics and microplastics. And we have seen these everywhere. They're ubiquitous. They've been found at the bottom of the Marianas Trench in the most remote deserts of the world. Every few months, some study comes out and documents microplastics in a place you wouldn't have expected to find them. We've been taking, maybe it's the next slide. Yeah, so we've been taking microplastic samples in the French Broad for over a year now to kind of see what a baseline might look like for us. And what we've seen here is about 40% of the microplastics we have found are what are called microfilms. And those are what are the degradation of like food wrappers, plastic shopping bags, things like that. Next slide. Studies are showing, so microplastics are carried by dust and wind and water very easily because they're so small. And studies are showing that we ingest about a credit card's worth every single week. And that's just through the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, etc. Next slide. And it becomes a human health issue. So most folks don't know this part of it either. Plastics are typically not purely just plastic. They have a lot of chemical additives to them. And it's these additives that give them the variable characteristics we think about with plastics. So if you think about like a plastic shopping bag versus a PVC pipe or something like that, you know, the chemicals are what give it that either flexibility versus sturdiness and things like that. It's been pretty well documented that these chemicals leach out into the environment, and that could be, you know, a drinking water source. It could be the human body. It could be a landfill, whatever. They readily leach out. And styrene specifically, which is the component in polystyrene or styrofoam, is classified as a likely or probable human carcinogen by places like the NIH, the World Health Organization, and has been linked to liver and kidney and circulatory problems. Class of chemicals called phthalates, which is used often in food packaging, is known endocrine disruptors, and they're linking harmful reproductive and nervous system impacts to these class of chemicals. And this is a growing body of literature as well. Every few months, a new study comes out linking these things together to human health impacts. So next slide. But this is one of those studies. Microplastics were found in the human placenta about a year ago, and that's on both the mother side and the fetal side. They've been found in our deep lung tissue, and they've been found in human poop, including a baby's first poop of their lives. So they really are ubiquitous at this point, and they're within our human body in places you wouldn't expect. Next slide. So now that I doomed and gloomed everybody, we're going to talk about what we want to do to help turn off the tap for plastics in our daily life. And I'll kick it over to Ken.
Thank you. I think the first thing I wanted to just say before we get too far into this, the details, is that there's been a large group of 10, 12 people that have been working for months. And also Anna's done a tremendous amount of research nationally about what's included in other ordinances and what works and what doesn't work. So we try to take all of that in to come up with a proposed model ordinance that we would look for the city to use as foundation for passing an ordinance to ban plastic bags and styrofoam. The second thing we did is we wanted to have something that was workable, that could be understood and actually work. And also, where can we get the biggest bang for the buck? So we focused on styrofoam and plastic bags at the point of sale at retail. So this would be at the checkout counter or takeout for restaurants and grocery stores, things like that. So we wanted to ban plastic bags at that point. What it doesn't include is if you go into the grocery store, produce, bulk items, meats, seafoods, the small bags that they use for those are not included in the ordinance. Also bags that would contain garbage, pet waste, yard waste, things like that. It's strictly those that are being given out at the point of sale. And so plastic bags would be banned, but retailers would have available recycled paper bags, 40% recycled content paper bags. And there would be a cost of 10 cents per bag. Why the 10 cents per bag? Our goal here is not to cut down more trees. Our goal is to get people into the habit of bringing their own reusable bags. So we wanted some of the studies that Ann has found around the country is it can reduce bag usage by 30%, 40%, something like that. Anna can correct me if I'm off on those percentages. But the idea is to get people from using either. However, people forget their bags. Some people don't have reusable bags, so there needs to be an alternative for them, and that's where the recycled plastic bags would be available. But there would be a cost. And the 10 cent, based on studies in other cities and counties and states, 10 cents seems to be the magic number. More than that doesn't necessarily change behavior anymore. Less than that doesn't. The 10 cent, it seems the magic number to really get people to bring their own bags. And less than that, 5 cent, didn't have the kind of impact on reducing use that a 10 cent fee did. So that's how we determined the 10 cent per bag fee. We're also very concerned about the impact on lower income and marginalized individuals. And so the fee would be exempt automatically on EBT, SNAP, WIC benefits, any kind of government food assistance program, it would automatically exempt the 10 cent. And again, this is something that we found in the research around the country that's pretty standard in most of the places that have passed these ordinances. The second thing is that there would be no polystyrene or styrofoam for food or beverage packaging for takeout. So again, there are alternatives. There's cardboard. So those are all available as alternatives. And many restaurants have already made that shift. And many grocery stores have already made the shift. Aldi's doesn't provide plastic bags, and Whole Foods and Earth Fare and many others are in that category. And there's a number of states that have banned plastic. So this is something that the grocery store chains are already dealing with in many locations. There's like Charleston, South Carolina is our closest one, and a good comparison for us. They're about the same size city. They depend heavily on tourism to get their things done. So no food. Straws would be available upon request. I know when I go into a restaurant today, I had lunch and they immediately brought me a straw, even though I didn't need it or want it. And so they would be available if you asked for it, but not automatically given to you. And the second thing is that this would exempt hospitals and nursing homes where straws are needed and important to individuals. And it would still be available upon request for people that need them or want them. It's just they wouldn't be automatically put out, stuck in a glass, only to be thrown away and dealt with. So that's a little bit about the overview of the bill that we've come. Is there a next slide? I'll back up just before we do it. That's pretty much an overview of that, and I'm happy to answer detailed questions after the presentation.
I think it's my turn to jump in. Again, this is Susanna Knox. I'm a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. So I'm here to talk about the legal support for passing these kinds of ordinances here in North Carolina. We would be the first in North Carolina. There are several other cities in North Carolina that are considering a similar ordinance. Durham is probably the farthest along, and we are coordinating with advocates in those cities as much as possible. I think as Ken mentioned, there are, or maybe Anna, there are about 400 cities, local governments across the United States that have done this. So while we would be potentially the first in North Carolina, there is a lot of precedent for local governments taking this issue into their hands in general, including in states that don't have a home rule where the cities have really wide latitude. We believe that there's a very strong basis under North Carolina law for these types of ordinances. First of all, the general ordinance making authority granted by the state to local governments is very broad, and it's interpreted very broadly by courts. There are certainly exceptions to that authority, but none of them would apply here. The Solid Waste Management Act also has some very helpful language for ordinances like these, requiring local governments to reduce solid waste at the source. So that would be excellent support as well. I will say, I know Brad, our city attorney, is here, and we did just meet with him last week. I won't speak for him and his analysis, but I believe he overall supports our analysis. But is interested to see if there's any precedent for just that fee issue for requiring businesses to charge a fee. So we're looking into that right now. The biggest concerns we've heard on the legal front up to this point really have so far been more to do with politics, especially the idea that there might be some sort of unrelated backlash against Asheville in the General Assembly. So we hope that the community outreach that we've done so far and will continue to do, and as well as coordinating with other cities and working out the right timing for rolling out the ordinance would allay some of those concerns. But I'm happy to take any questions about any of those matters as well when we're done, or at any time.
All right, so if you're like me, you're thinking, you probably had a sense that plastic bag was bad for our environment, but the fact that it's a climate change issue, an equity issue, a human health issue, I'm thinking this seems like a great policy and a great way for us to move forward. So how do we do that? I think that's a really important question. And we spent a great deal of time thinking about it, but also talking to a whole bunch of other municipalities. I'll say having over 400 municipalities already done this, puts us really kind of behind the times. But the good thing is you can glean a lot of advice about what other folks have done and what has worked and what hasn't worked. And so we've tried to do that thinking about not only the ordinance, but how do we implement the ordinance? So several pieces of this, and I do have a more sort of detailed outreach strategy that didn't make your packet, but happy to send it to you. We would not be looking upon passage of this ordinance that there would be implementation of the ordinance in the very near future. We kind of have that as a question mark, but I think within our group, we're thinking 6 to 12 months would be the kind of the phase-in plan. And the reason that that's important is it allows us time to educate the public and work with businesses to kind of get them ready for this transition. Our group, Plastic Free WNC, is fully ready to take on that responsibility, working as closely with the city as the city would like to work with us. In our outreach to a lot of other municipalities, we found that budgeting wasn't nearly as cumbersome as we thought it might be. Originally, I think we were thinking of a pretty lofty budget number in order to implement this. And the largest budget we found reaching out to other cities was Charleston. They got a grant for about $35,000. And the advice we got from Charleston is we really didn't need that much money, but it was nice and it was helpful. And so they did a pretty robust outreach and implementation because they had that money. So we want to be optimistic though. We're budgeting for $50,000 just in case some of the items that Charleston was able to procure for free, like they got a lot of free bags, they got a lot of free advertising. If we do have to fully purchase all that, we think $50,000 will cover it. And really the key pieces of the plan are marketing and education and reusable bag distribution. And most municipalities we've talked to, they said the marketing really took care of itself in a lot of instances. The public is interested, the press is interested, and so they really relied heavily on those outlets to sort of reach the public and reach businesses. So we'll definitely rely on that, but we don't want to just rely on that. So we're gonna kind of go above and beyond that using traditional media, but also using a variety of social media channels, paid advertising through a variety of media channels, and creating some marketing materials. Some of the key marketing materials we heard other municipalities use was signage at businesses, alerting the public to what the ordinance is about and why why it's important. Magnets reminding folks to bring their bags, and flyers that could be handed out potentially in water bills, but also used in other sort of tabling environments. Charleston did a lot of workshops for businesses. We thought that was a good opportunity to, maybe target different levels of business. So workshop with grocers, a workshop with restaurants, explaining the ordinance, talking through how to implement that. So we're planning to do that. And probably the biggest focus will be the reusable bag distribution. That was, really targeted as kind of a key piece of the puzzle. Most folks, they said they were buying about a third of their population in bags. So we have 30,000 bags targeted, and we're really looking, the bags will be available to the general public, but we're really looking to target low-income residents. And we spent a lot of time and got a lot of feedback on the best ways to do that. I'm hitting on that real briefly, but, looking at passing out bags at bus station, having distribution centers at bus stations, public housing, community centers, libraries. We also talking about doing a give a bag, take a bag at different retail establishments. We talked about having bins where folks could, be set up strategically to take bags as they needed, and looking at doing a lot of sort of education outreach events, particularly in the start of the rollout, setting up at Ingalls and setting up at some of the larger retailers to reach the public as they're kind of learning about this for the first time. So that's kind of the highlights. And again, I got some more detail that I'm happy to share with you in a document, but also happy to answer as many questions as you like. You can go to the next. So enforcement is another key question. So, is this going to be a giant burden on the city of Asheville, who already has, more to do than they can do? And the answer we got from all the municipalities we talked to was no. It really was not burdensome at all in some instances, but pretty light burden in other instances. We got response everything from 5 complaints a year to 15 a month. I think that was Charleston. Now we know folks in Asheville love to complain about stuff, so I don't want to say that we won't get any complaints, but it didn't seem like it was an overwhelming number of complaints. Everyone that we talked to relied on citizen complaints, which I think is pretty standard in this type of ordinance. I think it's pretty standard on a lot of other things the city of Asheville does. So there's not a plastic bag police. If they got a complaint, what most municipalities were doing is they were following up with kind of a form letter. They're saying, we've gotten a complaint. Here's the rules of our ordinance. Here's how you can comply. And that's really it, unless they get repeated complaints. I'll say the best thing we heard was that everybody we talked to said all the big retailers just fell in line. And so, really the complaints they're getting are from a handful of mom and pop shops. There's a few repeat offenders. So I thought it was really encouraging, because even if you have problems with a handful of businesses, you're getting your biggest retailers, which is where the vast majority of your plastic is coming from. So I thought that was really encouraging. And no municipality we spoke to had to fine. And we're trying to learn a little bit more about how this process works, but a lot of other municipalities were using the business license process. So if they were having a problem with, sort of a repeat offender, when it came time to renew their business license, they would use that as an opportunity to do outreach and encouragement to comply. So we need to learn a little bit more about how that would work with the city of Asheville, but that was an option a lot of others used. You can go to the next.
So in order to address the equity question about a plastic bag ban, we talked with a lot of groups, we talked with a lot of people, and I'm going to go through that with you. And Kim, I may address your question here about why we chose the exemptions that we did. So there were a group of us who individually reached out to 21 organizations that worked with low income or unhoused or vulnerable populations. And we heard back from 11 of those, and they're listed on this slide. We also were able to email a questionnaire to the Asheville Homeless Initiative members. From that mailing, we got 41 responses, including 27 organizations, which were probably similar. Some of them were the same as the ones that we had spoken with earlier. Could I have the next slide, please? So we found that most groups were generally supportive of the ordinance. There were some challenges that they would like to see addressed. And those included the fact that homeless people and others can't always afford 10 cents, a 10-cent fee on a paper bag, that they don't, some but not all, low wealth or unhoused people have reusable bags, but they may not have enough. So they were asking for free bag distribution, which Hartwell talked about. But they had a little more requirements that these bags be waterproof, that they be washable, that they have handles, and they would like 2 to 3 of them per person. But that, we can't just do a rollout at the beginning. We have to have a consistent use to these free reusable bags. And then again, these organizations and individuals suggested certain locations that would be good for distribution that Hartwell already mentioned. Can I have the next slide, please? And it's not mine. Just one other thing I wanted to say was that we also spoke with people in a low wealth community, people who lived in Shiloh and lived in public housing, and they really had very little concerns. They said that, given enough advance notice, that they would be able to adapt. they did also want to have free reusable bags. So it doesn't seem like this is a big issue, a big equity issue. I did speak with 3 organizations in Eugene, Oregon, who a similar sized city with a home unhoused population, and they said their homeless population is so serious that it was not even a blip on the radar when they instituted a plastic bag ban. So yeah, I think from what we have learned, it is not a big issue, and it can easily be addressed by providing free reusable bags.
I can jump in on the business survey. Y'all should have this report in the file that we sent over. Since then, we've gotten 3 more responses, so we're up to 60 responses now. But just a little bit of a backdrop, we sent a survey out to local businesses through the Chamber of Commerce email listserv, as well as AIR, and then some targeted business associations. And then we also individually reached out to folks we know who own businesses. And so we, at this point, have 60 responses, which is actually on par with the city of Durham. They did a similar survey a couple of years ago and got 60 responses. And generally, folks are supportive of the bag ban and the styrofoam ban. You can see the percentages here on the slide, 87%, 93%. Favor. A lot of written feedback was in the gist of, why haven't we done this already? This is a great idea. Let's do this type of a thing. In terms of economic impact to their particular businesses, 86% stated low or no economic impact by a bag ban or a straw by request only policy. We did get 2 negative responses in the gist of all that. But you can see all the details to that in your folders. I think when I recrunched the numbers with the 3 new responses, everything actually shifted up a percentage point or so. So take that with a grain of salt. Next slide. And I guess that's it for us. I guess we're happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Hey, I'll just add one piece before we take questions. There's also kind of a cost analysis in the folder that we sent. And, you know, I think it's me and Anna spent some time this week thinking through, you know, what are the cost of businesses? And so I just want to walk you through that real briefly to kind of lay out that, to help explain that analysis that's in your folder. You know, when you're thinking about grocers and as far as the cost, it's really a cost savings across the board. You're looking at, they are currently paying for plastic bags. That will be eliminated, and they will now start getting paid for paper bags. So as far as grocers, there's should be a fairly substantial cost savings. Now, as far as restaurants, really the only impact to restaurants would be folks that are serving styrofoam. We're not covering serviceware that isn't styrofoam. So I think it's fair to say this is super unscientific, but the vast majority of Asheville restaurants are already not serving styrofoam. So I think you're talking about a small minority. Now, I do love Ingles fried chicken, and that comes in styrofoam, so I don't want to overlook that. But the cost comparison when you're looking at replacing styrofoam cups to a sustainable alternative or a not sustainable alternative, because we're not requiring a sustainable alternative. You could place styrofoam cups with plastic cups if you want to, is extremely minimal. So that's kind of listed out. You're talking like 1 or 2 cents in either direction, depending on what product you're looking at.
Hartwell, I hate to interrupt you. The cost material, did you put that in your folder after Friday? Or is...
Oh, it's possible. And if so, we can send it. I can even send it to you right now and we can display it, but we can definitely send it to you after. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Just so you know that I don't think anyone's seen that.
Okay.
So make sure that we can send that and post that online so everyone has access. That'd be great.
We have quite a bit of questions racking up here. I'll just go in the order of hands being raised. Maggie, you're up first.
Yeah, my question is just about, and you may have said this and I missed it, but if you were to purchase a large number of reusable bags to hand out, have you thought about which material would be best for that?
We have looked into that. And while there's no neutral option, we do think the least or the best material to be used is a recycled plastic material in terms of water sustainability and getting plastic out of landfills and out of the environment and cost as well as use per life cycle of the product, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. A lot of people want us to use organic cotton, which has a pretty significant footprint.
Yeah. I mean, I think organic cotton is great, but it's not going to help your homeless population if they, if it gets wet or sodden or what have you. There's all those things to think about too. Yeah, thank you.
For sure.
I did think there's potential there'll be a couple types of reusable bags because we talked to a lot of other municipalities that said that they got a lot of free donated bags from retailers or from other environmental organizations. The kinds that we would buy, we would definitely target the materials Anna talked about and the kind of the uses that Jane said were important to low income folks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Steve, you got a question?
I actually have 3. Is that okay? Maybe. Cut me off if it's too much. First, let me say thanks for all this effort, and you can put me in the why haven't we done this a long time ago camp. But getting it done and getting it done right, of course, is very important. And I had questions, comments about 3 things, as I said. One is on the question of impact on businesses. I looked at the business survey that you all sent out that was alluded to briefly, which seemed good, but it also struck me as being sort of broad brush. And, folks like Harris Teeter, Whole Foods, these are companies, as I'm sure, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, operate in multiple jurisdictions. I wonder if you have or if you plan to run the draft ordinance, the specifics by these kinds of all sorts of businesses to get their input, maybe tweaking the draft as is. That's number one. Should I stop there and get?
Yeah, I can chime in on that if you want, because we had a good meeting with Bridget, Kira, Jed, and then another good meeting with Brad. And while we think our business survey is pretty robust, I think the feedback from all of them was it could always be more robust. And so I think you're right. I think we're gonna not only target some of the big retailers you mentioned, but also specifically target people we think might not like this. We have gotten some feedback from Ingalls, which was positive, but we want to look at the Retail Merchants Association, some other associations that we typically don't support these kind of things, and get that feedback now rather than getting it at the last minute.
Right, feedback on the specifics of the draft.
Yeah, one of the challenges, the questionnaire we sent out had 10 questions. We tried to hit the major points of what was in the ordinance, but the more questions you ask, the more people, the response rate goes down.
No, understood, but there's no substitute for saying this is what we propose to do with a specific language and see what people have to say rather than anyway, that's one point.
Okay.
The other is experience of other local government jurisdictions. We have 400 local governments that have done like 900. This must be the perfect draft ever. And I 2 questions in that regard. One is, you mentioned Charleston. Does this draft differ in any significant respect from Charleston? And if so, how and why? And related to that, a little more detail if you can give me on where Durham is and whether they have a draft available, and whether Asheville might not do well to hold hands with Durham in being the first in this state?
I'll answer the last one and then defer to somebody else on the second question. The last one is there's one major difference between us and Durham. Our 10-cent fee goes to the merchant to offset any additional costs they have, and also not to add any administrative burdens to the city, to have to collect a fee, things like that. Durham is looking at the fee going to their to their government in terms of being able to use it to offset some other things they want to do from a waste management standpoint. So that's the biggest difference between us and Durham. Quite frankly, we chose to go the route we did to keep it with the retailer for those very reasons, not to overburden the city on the administrative side. Number two, we think it would reduce any arguments that, oh, this is going to cost us money. So we think that's the major difference that we've got. And I'll let Susanna or Hartwell talk about Charleston.
I don't know the Charleston answer. Anna, do you know that? I do know Anna, talk about all the ones you looked at. I don't know if you know specifically Charleston.
I couldn't remember, so I was looking up really fast. I think they just have a ban without the 10-cent fee attached to the paper. I need to dig into my notes a little bit more, if that's correct. And they might also have polystyrene as a ban for takeout containers. So yeah, just when I was doing research on the different ordinances, this is what seemed to be the best model to get people to bring reusable bags to the store, no matter what kind of store it was. It invoked the most behavior change is what I found. So a lot of places, just banned plastic bags, and then everybody relied on paper. So the usage of paper skyrocketed. And then we've learned a lot along the way since California implemented the first ban, I think in 2007 in San Francisco. So they made a lot of trial and error, and we hope we have the gold standard at this point.
Good.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's the other option, which is a fee on plastic, and that while that does reduce plastic bag consumption greatly, sometimes 30 to 80%, depending on where you are. Banning it reduces it more, obviously. And there's a few other kind of add-on components. It depend on the ordinances around the country. There's styrofoam, there's serviceware. We actually had serviceware in there, plastic serviceware originally, but we realized we needed to think through that more robustly about how you would compost those and how that would really work. And so we kind of decided that might be a good phase 2 piece of the puzzle.
Last point is in the legal area, not on the legality of fees and all that, but I took a look at some of the citations in the whereas clauses on the solid waste management statute. And this is maybe too quickly, but and I don't want to get into the weeds on that, but it did seem to me that there were at least a couple other provisions that might be referenced and might provide, I don't know if you've looked at them, Susanna, might provide support for the city's authority to act. One is the statement of the solid waste management policy and goals, which is to assist local governments with solid waste management and establishes that hierarchy of what's important. It's the source, the waste reduction at the source, which I think is referenced as in one of the presentation pieces. But there's a specific, this is important, and assisting local governments in that respect might be a provision that you might wish to cite as well in the whereas clauses. And the other one that I came across, and this may be too quickly, I may have missed it, but there's a provision that basically I think would be supportive of taking action like this to help mitigate the situation that we saw in that video about how plastic bags gum up the works. It's the provision in the solid waste management statute that says each local government shall assess the local solid waste collection services and disposal capacity, and implement programs and take other actions that it determines are necessary to address deficiencies in service or capacity required to meet local needs and protect human health, et cetera. So I don't know whether that, would cover an additional reason to do this is to get plastic bags out of the sorting process in recycling. And last note, if I can, on the legal thing, there's one citation that I think is a miscitation, and I can just note it in one of those whereas clauses, and I can get with Susanna or something like that to let you know. I think it must have been a typo or something.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for looking at that so carefully.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, that's a good point, Steve. Thank you for bringing up the proposed ordinance, because that is something that we will eventually vote on as a board. So certainly keep that in mind as you have questions throughout this meeting. Hopefully we've all been able to breeze through it. But Chris, I think you were the next person who had a question.
Sure, thanks. Forgive me, Susanna, if you mentioned this, but I could have sworn on the slide that you presented that the Outer Banks attempted to do something like this, but it was repealed by the state. Did I read that correctly?
Sure. Yeah, the Outer Banks situation is really, I mentioned that on the slide just to highlight that action taken by local government, and it doesn't affect local government authority to take any similar action. It was a bill that was passed in the General Assembly originally, but only applied to 3 counties on the coast in the Outer Banks. And they ended up repealing it. There was obviously some political pressure that led to them repealing it, but the stated reason for the repeal was actually that they improperly used the process for passing a statewide bill when it should have been a local bill because it didn't apply statewide. So none of those legal difficulties would be applicable to any action taken by a local government.
Okay, perfect. So thank you. And the other question I have, there's no law that states retailers must provide bags. Is that correct? This is an amenity that stores offer to retailers.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, Aldi's doesn't offer bags.
That it's unfortunate that some of these value-oriented stores, which perhaps some of us frequent, it's almost a standard and an expectation that there are no bags and you bring them. And it would be great to see some of the more popular retailers take that, but that's just where we are as a culture, and hopefully that'll change. And I think things like this will help make that change. So I hope this, I'm biased. I come from a place where you could not put your trash into opaque plastic bags so that the city could see and citation you if you were throwing out recyclables. So I totally support this and would love to see it happen.
Thanks, Chris. Allison, you had a question?
Yes, I put it in the chat, but so by banning styrofoam from restaurants, does that include fast food restaurants? Because there are quite a few that still do use styrofoam.
The answer is yes, it would include fast food.
Okay, and I would welcome the chance to discuss the actual language of the ordinance and the rollout in terms of the timing. And I know in the subcommittee, we talked about a phased rollout versus all at once. So I'm wondering about the pros and cons of, maybe starting with plastic bags, then moving to styrofoam, or just doing it all at once.
I would just say from a cost and standpoint, doing both educational programs at the same time, doing the one bag at the same time, I think makes a lot of sense. It's going to be changed. Why go through that twice and do it once would be my personal opinion.
Anna got some good feedback from several other municipalities. Some had done a phased rollout where big retailers went first and then small retailers went second. I kind of like that on the surface, but the feedback Anna got was it was just confusing to the public. It was much better to just do it all at once. People didn't know why they couldn't get a bag at Ingles, but they could get one at CVS or whatever, whatever it was. So their advice was do it all at once. It was easier for the public to understand.
One thing I did fail to mention is on the bag fee, paper bag fee, we are exempting small paper bags. For example, if you go through McDonald's today, you get your stuff in a paper bag. Fortunately, they've given up plastic bags, good for them. So we didn't feel like adding 10 cents to the price of a burger. So small paper bags are excluded from the 10-cent fee.
Good question. Thanks, Allison. Tim, you're up next.
Great, thank you. That was a really compelling and excellent presentation, and also depressing to find out that my lungs are filled with credit cards. I did have two quick questions. One was the two businesses that responded negatively, was there an attempt to talk to them afterwards to try to get them on board or to alleviate their concerns?
The survey was anonymous, so we're not sure where those responses came from necessarily.
Okay.
But the responses like, keep government out of my business.
Yeah, they were lacking. Yeah, they weren't super thorough. Just like keep your nose out of our business, and we shouldn't do this. Period.
Yeah, we debated the value of having people say who they were, because we did want to follow up, but the advice we got from the survey folks were you'll get more responses if it's anonymous. So we lost a little on the ability to follow up, but I think we gained some on number of responses.
Okay. The second question was, when I moved here 15 years ago, I think Buncombe County had a bag program. You may remember these green bags that kind of mimicked a brown paper bag with handles. They were giving them out at the libraries and elsewhere. And wondering if any lessons learned from that program, if it was something that was successful, or if you could even speak to that a little bit, how it might relate to this.
Well, Ken's the oldest guy, not to call you out, Ken, but I've been around doing this 15 years. I actually don't remember that. But that's good feedback to see if there's anybody in the county that does remember and how that went.
Yeah.
I don't remember how I got it, but I've got a couple of those bags.
All right, thank you.
Michael, you're up next.
Thank you. Well, I also want to echo that this was such a thorough research you've done, and the clarity of presentation is outstanding. And it reaffirms why I belong to all your groups and support your work. And like Chris, I have a bias. I bicycle along the French Broad River at least 3 to 4 times between Woodfin and Marshall a week. And it is just unbelievably littered with plastic, and a lot of it obviously blowing into the river, but along the roadside. So I would love to see not only this ordinance, but like Maine and Oregon, extended producer responsibility for all of the recyclables, and a carbon fee on petrochemical stocks, which would reflect the real price. So there's so much that needs to be done, and I just hope, I don't know where the city is limited, but it would be nice if they could send messages up to the state level that we can only do so much at the city level, but how about the state doing something, realizing the state is not necessarily a leader on these things compared to some of the others.
I'll just say a lot of this came from the thousands of river cleanups that have been done over the years by us and Asheville Greenworks and Riverlink, and the realization that we weren't going to clean our way out of this mess. We've cleaned the Swannanoa 10 times some summers, and it'd be just as bad every time. And so putting our energy towards something that might reduce that for the next cleanup. But I don't think this will be the only solution, but hopefully one of many.
right. Thank you, Michael. Kim, you're up next.
I just wanted to kind of follow up with the question I put in the chat. I do really love this effort and support what you're doing. I'm just curious about how you chose the items that you did, and is there a phase 2, 3, 4 to kind of go further with different types of plastic?
I'll answer the first part of that. I think we really wanted to get something that would give us the biggest bang for the buck, that would be easily understood, that we could get implemented, that would be successful. Because the more successful phase 1 is, the greater the likelihood you can have a phase 2 or phase 3. Certainly we'd like to eliminate a lot more plastic, but we figured this was a great place to start. And if we can make this successful, then it certainly opens up the opportunity to come back and look at ways to enhance it in the future.
Can I have a follow-up on that, and have you considered the plastic bags for yard waste being connected to the city's effort, or at least some of us in the city, to get that as a ban as well? It seems kind of odd that we're going to put a ban on plastics and then say, oh, but it's okay if the city still collects garbage bags, plastic garbage bags with leaves.
Yeah, I can answer that. The language we used is pretty standard, and it is another communications thing in terms of like bags in a package of other bags. We don't want to ban trash bags necessarily, because that opens a whole new realm of worms to deal with. And that yard waste bag is similar to that category. So kind of like what Ken was referring to, this is a phase 1, and hopefully the ball will continue to move forward as we, start winning these things.
Great, thank you so much, and definitely looking forward to seeing success on this phase 1 and the additional phases as we go forward.
If I can just jump in and add to that a little bit, we did consider also banning plastic serviceware and having certain exemptions for restaurants and businesses that might not have dishwashing capacity and that sort of thing. It introduced, we found that it introduced a little bit more complexity into the ordinance than the other pieces that we thought would be more impactful. It also potentially introduced more costs because some of the plant-based alternatives to that serviceware are more costly in comparison to the alternatives to the other items. So this is something we've considered. We've also looked at just kind of, again, obviously we've looked extensively into what's been done elsewhere. We found that is not something that there's a lot of precedent for elsewhere in the country. So we would be a little bit more tip of the spear if we tackled that issue right away as well. But certainly we agree that there's always more to be done. And we hope that this could be just a first step. But we wanted to stick with something that would be somewhat simple and easy for the public and to understand and for businesses to implement, and also something that would kind of get the low-hanging fruit and be the most impactful, at least as a first step.
Great. Thank you, Susanna, for that clarification. To bring the public up to speed that may not be following along virtually, but on the phone, Anna made a comment in the chat that the Charleston ban has a ban on plastic bags that are 4 millimeters thick and no fee, or 4 millimeters or less. Ann Keller had a question. How many surveys were sent out to get the 60 replies? If someone could respond to that.
I think over 500 were sent out by the Chamber of Commerce, plus AIR sent out to their members. So I don't know how many, but at least 500 were sent out.
And Suzanne may have already mentioned this, but she also commented in the chat box that the Charleston ban does include styrofoam. It looks like we had a couple more questions, hands raised. Allison, you had another question?
Yeah, sorry, I've raised my hand again. I see Jess has her hand raised. So my questions, I'm going to segue right into you because I just wanted to clarify about who's paying and is there extra burden on the city as a result of implementing this? Who's paying for the bags? Who's paying for the education campaign? And is there going to be an additional burden on city staff? So that's just, and then maybe Jess could ask her questions too to add to that.
Our targeted budget, as I mentioned, was 50,000. I don't think we need 50,000, but we want to shoot for that. And the places we think we can get that money are potentially the city of Asheville, but not totally reliant on that, and grant sources, particularly the community foundation. We think is a very likely source to get some funds. They have a fund specific to water quality in Buncombe County, and Mountain True and Greenworks and Riverlink and others routinely apply and receive those funds.
We also think if we fall short, that this is a popular enough issue that private donations could also make up some of the so we don't see one source, we see multiple sources. But we would like the city to kick in some money to help with buying bags.
I was really encouraged that the amount of donations that other municipalities got, including free billboards, free advertising, free public service announcements, free bags. So I think within the network of our group, I think we'll be pretty successful in using as little resources as possible.
And I just wanted to mention that we have Jess Foster on the line, who's our sanitation division manager, as well as Brad Brantham, who is our head legal attorney. So I wanted to invite them to the conversation as well. I know Jess has her hand raised.
Thanks. Yeah. So I still have some questions, even though it's tried to be clarified, but I still have some questions about really what is being proposed to be banned. So I've made quite a few comments already on the draft ordinance, and I know that we'll meet later to discuss those. But so there's the words polystyrene and styrofoam, right? So styrofoam is a brand name, and it is one type of polystyrene. But in the draft ordinance, you talk about prohibitions on polystyrene that would include that expanded polystyrene, which is like the fluffy styrofoam stuff, right? But then you also talk about hard polystyrene and oriented polystyrene, which might include like forks and knives and utensils and solid clamshells. So to me, it gets confusing if we say like we're telling a restaurant you can have plastic serviceware, but it can't be made out of polystyrene. So then are people like, well, I'm looking for a PET fork, or I'm looking for this other plastic fork. And it also defines disposable plasticware as plastic or polystyrene, and that people could ask for it just like they can a straw. So I think I just need some clarity around that. Like, is it only polystyrene? Is it only expanded polystyrene? That's my first question.
You're defer to Suzanne, not Susanna, but Anna.
So I would need to go back into the ordinance to look at all the definitions, but it would include polystyrene takeout containers. And I don't remember how it's defined, which is my fault. I should go back and look at that. And whether that's expanded polystyrene or not. And then the disposable plastic serviceware cannot be polystyrene, but it can be plastic, PET, and it's an on request only policy.
Okay.
Does that make
sense?
I
don't think that's what the draft ordinance that I have says. Like, it does define it as plastic or polystyrene, but so,
okay.
Yeah, just maybe cleaning that up and getting some clarity around those things.
Yeah, for sure. That's good feedback.
I also don't know what the percentage of, if you go to buy plastic forks, are they mostly PET? Are they mostly polystyrene? I don't know. So I'm curious what impact that would have.
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, we kind of just copied what other municipalities put as their definitions. So it's worth going in and cleaning up.
Yeah, we'd appreciate working with you and anybody else in city staff. Anything we can do to make it clearer, make more sense, we certainly want to do that.
Great, thank you. Since Kim brought it up also about the yard waste bags, that is something that we've been talking about for quite a while, at least within maybe in the subcommittee and just at the city in general. Not putting a ban on trash bags in general, but requiring that residents either use those compostable paper leaf bags or a reusable container in our yard waste operations. And that's an operational change that doesn't require any, state support. It just would require an ordinance change in how we do our operations. So that is something that I am really would like to get feedback, from the public and from others on how we might move to that, because it would really increase our efficiency and also reduce plastic waste in the community. And doesn't have to be part of this, but it might make sense to roll those together if we are just rolling out a plastic bag ban. But I hear that this is maybe a different focus. So anyway, that's my comment on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Anne, you had a question?
I do. I may be wrong, but I think we have to look at the ordinance together live at this meeting if we're going to make any vote on it next time. We haven't done that yet. We're talking all about the presentation and referring to the ordinance, but we haven't shared it. We haven't talked it through, and I think we have to do that.
Great point, Anne. Yeah, I was going to see if maybe Kira could present the ordinance, and perhaps one of our presenting members could go through it for us.
I'm pulling it up. Give me a second.
Thank you.
Now, while Kira's doing that, I had a couple of questions that came up. And this is just thinking about logistics. Do we have a handle on how many businesses would be impacted, and like how much, who it is that we need to reach when we think about rolling this out, and what the scope of that education would be?
I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know if the city has a number of how many businesses operate in the city of Asheville or not. I have not seen that number. The chamber may have some numbers on that. We know they've got over 500 members.
I don't know the number, but Bridget, some of your previous recommendations on outreach were helpful already. I talked to Mountain BizWorks, and they're actually doing a business survey already, or they're doing one soon, and that covers like 1,000 businesses. Now, I don't know if that's all City of Asheville, but I think they're willing to help us do some outreach. So I don't know if we know the number, but I know that we're going to shoot as widely and broadly as we can to reach as many as possible.
And then I don't know if you did it sounded like this time when we had the conversation that there needed to be some kind of a long-term strategy for making bags available to community members and how that would be rolled out. Do you have any estimates on like what that looks like, or how long that process has gone in other places?
I don't know that I did, but I think, and so feel free to chime in, anybody else, but I think there's a fine line that we've heard, and I think I might have mentioned this before, but originally we thought, well, we'll just get 100,000 bags or 200,000 bags, but there's a point where it defeats the purpose of reducing plastic if you're making reusable bags sort of disposable. And so I think while, right now we're talking about you're talking about a year leading up and a year after. I mean, you may make a good point. Like, I think at some point we'd probably want to get out of the reusable bag distribution, but when is the right point? I don't know. We might have to just assess that as we go. I mean, at some point you'd hope that it would just become part of what people do. But it may be that a year after is not nearly enough. It may be 5 years after might be the right time. So I think we're open to looking at that and invest in that time if we need to.
We can also reach out to these other cities that have implemented it and see how long they did something like that.
Anna, do you want to kind of go through the highlights? I mean, the ordinance is, I don't think we want to read it, right? But maybe just hit the highlights, which we've really hit, in talking. We've talked around a lot of it, but.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So.
All the whereases or move to the base part of the ordinance?
Yeah, the first couple pages are whereases, so we can skip through those.
Kira, could you make it a little bit bigger? It's probably hard for other people to read, even though you can expand your screen. Thank you.
The first section really defines what we're talking about in terms of which businesses will take part or feel the effect of the ordinance. And that's most grocery stores, retailers, and restaurants. It talks about the recycled bag. We're requesting that the recycled bag that's available at checkout be 40% recycled paper. We define plastic. We define single-use bags. Trying to think what else might be. Oh, here's the disposable plasticware.
I think, don't we need some of the comments that were made during the meeting today is that some of those definitions need to be reworked and changed before the vote is taken next month. So if I'm not mistaken, that's part of what has to be worked on.
Do we work on it today here? Or do we come back?
I'm not sure, as long as it's final by next meeting. I'm not sure. We need to have it, as I recall, in our hands and final. It needs to be posted final before we can vote on it. So
I would suggest maybe that we take notes of all the comments that were suggested today, and then perhaps we bring this to the working group to get a final draft before it's proposed to full Stacy board in the July meeting. How does everybody feel about that? How does the waste reduction working group feel about that? Because that's who will be doing the work.
That makes sense. I don't think we can wordsmith it right now in this big group. But Anne has a good point about process.
Sounds good to me.
And I'm sure Anna would be happy to meet with her. I'm volunteering her without her permission here to work with that group to be able to explain why certain things were the way they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm happy to join in as well.
And so before the next meeting in July, we will have to have this all final, and obviously it comes with us with the meeting materials to Stacy and also is posted for the public. And at that point, if other changes have to occur, we wouldn't be able to vote on it at the meeting, I think.
I think we can probably fix it or make it to its final state somewhat quickly.
That's great.
And occasionally we have been able to vote on something with the motion, including a certain edit, if there is a minor edit made. But yeah, Anna's right. It needs to be pretty much final by July.
Yep, we have done that occasionally. You're right. A few words or something, but not a whole big, a lot of rewriting going on.
What's the date this needs to go out? When do you need it finalized to meet your deadlines?
It's usually the Friday before the Stacy meeting. So we meet the third Wednesday of July, which will be
20th.
The 20th. So it will need to be final by the 15th, July 15th.
I would hope we could have it finalized in June. so that we're not up against a last minute deadline?
I would suggest after the working group gets it final, maybe it can be distributed to SACE, the full SACE board, well before that July meeting, so that we can also individually wordsmith it if necessary.
Great. Do we keep going through the ordinance? Okay. So the second section defines what the prohibition on single-use plastic bags is. Just saying retailers cannot have a plastic bag at checkout. Do y'all want to answer these questions?
Go for it.
Allison, did you have one about this?
I think Steve Barron had one.
Oh, thanks. Steve?
Sorry, which are you pointing to here? I'm sorry.
Did you have a question about the single-use or the prohibition on single-use bags, section 2?
No, I don't think so. I had, no, mine had gone to the whereas clause where you're talking about the legal authority. That's the only specific language issue that I had.
Oh, great. And I think you put that in the chat, right?
Yeah, I did. So we don't need to talk about that, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just going back to Jess's comment about the leaf bags. And so I guess it goes back to the definition. It is a single-use plastic bag, but it's not a point of sale plastic bag. So is that the difference?
It's that, and then that's kind of like regulating the individual versus regulating the business. Does that make sense? Because we're also not including pet waste bags and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything else on section 2? So section 3, we go into the paper bags that can be offered and the fees attached to them. Basically just says retailers can have a paper bag for sale at checkout with a 10-cent fee attached. There's an exemption for people using EBT cards on SNAP or WIC programs. And that fee stays with the retailer. I'm not sure if we covered this, but the idea behind that is to help offset the cost for paper because it's more expensive, and to help businesses kind of be on our side about switching over to this.
But the main reason is it changes behavior.
Exactly. Section 4 is the section on polystyrene. Anna?
Are the fees required to be collected, or is this just something that the restaurant or retail has the option to collect?
They're required because it is that fee that creates behavior change. So if there wasn't a fee attached, people would just show up to the store and rely on a paper bag to take their stuff out of the store. That's what social science is showing. So with that fee, people feel it in their pocketbooks, and so they're more likely to bring their reusable bags with them into the store. And we want the retailers to keep that fee so that it's not confusing. It can't be misconstrued as a tax. So it helps offset the cost of paper, and it helps people bring in their reusable bags with them as well.
And it eliminates the administration burden for the city.
Yeah. Good question. Anything else on paper bags? Okay.
I just don't think that it's actually very clear in this ordinance that fee is a requirement. But maybe it is. I just haven't read it very clearly. But I guess that's just something that the working group can look at as well.
Okay.
Can you back
we can look at that wording?
Yeah, or back up and see how the wording is. It's a little above. It says required to collect a paper bag fee.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Section 4 is the polystyrene. This section on polystyrene. Yeah, Allison, if you want to make a comment on the document, that might
Yeah,
be
I guess I
easier.
better. I think I agree with Anna P. that that was confusing. So, like with it says the businesses may retain the fee, but you're saying that they actually will retain the fee.
They will, yeah.
Yeah. So I would change that word from may retain to will retain. It's at the very number 3. Fees collected may be retained by the covered businesses.
Yeah, that's an easy fix. And y'all have this document, right? Y'all commented on it?
This document's in the meeting materials folder, so, and it's linked in the agenda as well.
Okay. Okay, so, oh wait, there's more. Bridget, did you have a question?
I have something, just a comment on section 4, if we're there. Just that as you're doing your outreach, if you can think about kind of keeping track of how many of these affected businesses are minority or women-owned businesses. You know, the city has done a lot of work to develop a business inclusion policy, and we would hate for this to be in conflict and would want to know who those vendors are so that we could work with them so they're not getting excluded from city business.
Definitely. Anne?
It occurs to me, and maybe this is just my experience because I've worked in other governments, that should say city government or something, because you can't tell the county what to do, right? And you can't tell the state. So when you're talking about government facilities, don't you have to be clear? Oh, there's city government, but it says here any government. So I guess I would go back through and carefully, or maybe in your definition, government said city. I don't know.
Where are you looking?
Number 2, no polystyrene foodware. It can be in any government facility or any government sponsored event.
Yeah, that's an easy.
I think I would do a search and try to decide, try to make sure that it's consistently clear that you're talking about the city of Asheville, not some other organization.
Yeah. Good eyes.
I would also raise something that's come up from our staff is that if this isn't a ban that's written into an ordinance, right? That's a regulation. We can't require it above and beyond in our event space. We've gotten some pushback from that in the past.
So other city facilities, just not event spaces?
An event space like Harris Cherokee Center, if they're trying to require a vendor that's participating in something at the center, if it's a city policy that goes above and beyond the ordinance, we've had challenges with being able to enforce that policy. So it would need to be consistent.
Okay. Yeah, I would love help drafting that language just because of the technicalities.
So you're saying that the Cherokee Center is a city-owned government facility?
Correct.
Okay.
These are all good. Anything, did we even go over polystyrene yet? Basically just prohibiting polystyrene takeout containers. Okay. The request requirement details, it's the straw on request policy, as well as the disposable plastic serviceware. And then the implementation just says that the effective date would be sometime 6 months to 12 months after the adoption by City Council. More of the logistics of the regulation. And then that covered businesses should have a sign detailing the specifics of the ordinance and how it affects that particular business.
Anna, does that, when it says developed by the city, does that mean the city of Asheville has to design and produce and give out the sign? Is there a cost associated with that?
I think we were thinking we would be happy to facilitate that, the WNC plastic free. If the city wanted to take that over, we're happy to let them. I do think it's probably good to have a standard looking graphic so that people know what they're looking at, regardless of what kind of store they're going into.
And so they're number 5 in that implementation section. You'd want to think through and either rephrase or do something so that what it's requiring is accurate.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that some of that should be part of an actual ordinance. Like maybe that's some part of an MOU or outside agreement, but not written into an ordinance about developing materials. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier, and this is maybe goes to number 2 in section 6, just figuring out how to communicate with covered businesses. During the presentation, you mentioned the business licensing process. And so we were informed that there is no business licensing process. We haven't had that for maybe 10 years, that authority was taken away from cities or is not part of city processes. So there's not some easy, process already in place where people are coming to get business licenses and we can inform them of the ordinance.
Just, I read through this before the meeting, and number 2 is one I kind of flagged too, because it says you have to give written notice to covered businesses. So that could get pretty cumbersome. So I think probably thinking through how do we work that to say that we're gonna, give notice, but like you wouldn't want to be required to put a piece of paper in every single business's mailbox. So yeah, I think that's a good one too. And I think the other one that this, requiring them to display signage might be, after having talked through all the other cities, that might be one that we want to say either delete, like you said, or encourage or.
Yeah, I see that. Number 5, I see that as a transition element. 6 months after the ordinance is in place, everyone's going to know about it, and it's business as usual. So I don't think we need it.
So probably strike number 2 and number 5. That's what I'm hearing.
Seems like it's something that could be reworded perhaps, or the working group could work on that to figure out whether it's necessary to have it in there or not. And then if it is, how do you say it, I guess?
Yeah.
Or maybe it says something like the city will undertake educational efforts to communicate the new requirements to businesses and consumers or something like that.
Okay, I'll flag those.
I'm certain that Brad and the city council and others are going to have to look through these things that are being supposedly required of the city to make sure that it's legal and, there's capacity.
Yes, once Stacey proposes this to city council, then that's when I believe it gets taken through the appropriate conduits of city council. Legal and council members can decide to change it before they vote on it as well. So it's a long process.
Yeah, and I think we're concerned about the concept and the objectives, and we're providing this as a starting point, and certainly it needs to be tweaked in ways that make sure it's legal, it's workable, but this is a starting point.
Good point. Okay, section 6. I think we were going to change this based on city's language about other enforcement policies. Is that correct, Hartwell? Didn't y'all talk about that?
Yeah, I think that was feedback you Jess gave, or maybe Bridget gave, was using sort of the language you guys already have in other ordinances.
So I don't think we've done that yet, but that's forthcoming.
Anna, do you have 2 section 6s that I just see, or am I, go back up a set?
Oh, you're right.
Okay.
Good eyes.
So just another reason to, model it after some of our other warning, violation, citation processes is like, if you say $100 for first offense and $200 for second offense, like, is that, consecutive days? Is it, you did it on Tuesday, then what happens Wednesday, then what happens Thursday? So, some of our ordinances are written where it's like you're charged $100 a day until you come into compliance. So just thinking about it in that way instead of it as a one-time offense, because otherwise maybe somebody would just pay the fee the one time.
Yeah, I was thinking the same sort of thing. If you don't have it, if it doesn't create a motivation to comply, then it really doesn't matter. But if you did it every single time, it's $100 or $200 or whatever, every single time, that you could run up a bill pretty fast. And you might not want to do that. So I think that's a good adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brad might want to check on this, but I at least in our solid waste ordinances, there's a $5,000 maximum, I think, that we can charge with a civil penalty.
Yeah, there are some limitations. This is Brad, everybody. There are some limitations on how we can structure the fines for any sort of a breach of a local ordinance. We try to be as specific as we possible about those things, but there is a certain point where we treat them in the nature of a debt and don't continue to rack up fines. We, in other words, undergo a legal process in order to either enforce the ordinance or take some other action that would be necessary to perhaps enjoin the activity. But we allow that to be somewhat subjective so that we can make the best decision about when to employ those tactics as possible. But I think everything that Jess said is exactly the kind of analysis that we would go through in determining and memorializing the kind of structure that you see elsewhere in our ordinances.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we're certainly comfortable with that. Our goal is to, as I said, high level to ban the plastic bags and styrofoam, and exact wording, we defer to the experts for you guys to tell us how we need to word these things to make it work.
Well, as Kira commented, the Stacy Waste Reduction Working Group is currently scheduled for June 8th at 2 p.m. So those on the Waste Reduction Working Group is Allison, Kim, and Maggie, I believe. Kira's the staff city liaison, and I'm sure Brad and Jess, you're welcome to attend. I'm sure that they would appreciate your input. Are there any final questions regarding the ordinance before we move on to public comment?
Would you like for Anna to attend that as well?
Absolutely. I think
Susanna also volunteered if you would like her.
Yeah, I think Mountain True would definitely need to be at the working meeting. Good point, Ken. Anna or Hartwell can attend.
I'll be there.
Great. All right. If there are no further questions, I just had one public comment, and it was actually technically from Sage Turner, who is out because she is ill today. She wanted me to let you all know that council awarded ARPA grants. They set aside $6 million for projects. While some had minor environmental impacts, $500,000 towards cleanliness, nothing was directly related to the environment. They're also announcing the TPDF applications this Friday with council's agenda and live at Tuesday's meeting. They are queuing up for the potential ban on plastic bags, so she is aware of it. So that's great to hear. It may move forward as the first North Carolina city to attempt this. Durham has a similar program of some sort, and it may not move forward at all. Only time will tell. Mountain True and the Sierra Club have more info. There is a petition circulating as well. It's quite possible the biggest and best thing we've done for our environment recently was last night. Residents pushed forward a very strong environmental council candidate, Maggie Ullman, who rose to the top of the votes and once ran the city's sustainability department, I believe in Bridget's position. There is ongoing work on boards and commissions. Reach out to SAGE with concerns or thoughts.
And just to clarify, the city did approve ARPA funds for the Greenbelt Alliance to do energy efficiency and renewable energy work in our low-income community. So
awesome.
Just FYI.
Yay.
I realize I'm speaking out of turn, but I just want to congratulate Bridget on her promotion, and we're really excited to have her in that role.
We definitely are too. Great. I don't believe there were any other public comments, right, Bridget? Okay. Well, this meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you all so much for your participation tonight.
Thank you, everybody.